The boardroom at Tobias Industries had that very clean, polished smell, like freshly cleaned leather chairs and new papers, mixed with a little bit of my dad's cologne. That smell had been in the room for over 30 years, ever since my father had been running the company. I sat at the far end of the long, shiny mahogany table with my laptop open. I was writing notes just like I always did during these big meetings. I liked to write down everything. I liked to understand how our family business worked. This company was very special. My grandfather had started it with just one small warehouse. Then my father had made it into a huge import-export empire. And my brother Lucian thought he would be the only one who could ever run it. Before I continue, don't forget to subscribe and join the awesome community. Drop a comment below to tell me where you're watching from. It was item number 7 on the meeting agenda when Lucian spoke. He used that confident, bossy voice that he had learned in business school. The Singapore project, he said, we've secured agreements with 3 big distributors and construction will start in 8 weeks. Dad's face lit up with a big smile. Excellent work, son. This is exactly the kind of thinking that builds a family business for generations. I kept typing on my laptop while Lucian clicked through his slides. He showed projected money we could earn, market analysis, and how our company compared to competitors. I had to admit it was good work. Lucian had always been good at fancy presentations, confident handshakes, and showing off in front of investors and clients. He had a way of making people believe he knew everything. The total money we need is $85 million, Lucian continued. We will spend it in steps over 18 months. The first $30 million will be used next week to buy property and get construction permits. Mom, sitting next to Dad, clasped her hands together like she was holding something very precious. I am so proud of you, Lucian. This is what real leadership looks like. I kept typing on my laptop. Dad suddenly looked at me and spoke. Sarai, are you following all of this? I know financial planning isn't really your favorite, but try to see the big picture. I nodded without looking up. I'm writing everything down, Dad. Lucian smirked at me the way he always did. Don't worry, Em. Not everyone has the vision to expand internationally. Your little consulting projects are nice too. Someone has to handle the small stuff. Other people at the table, like Uncle Bastian, Dad's old friend Leander, and Isolde, the company CFO, looked a little uncomfortable. They knew my small consulting projects weren't really small. I had been helping 3 huge companies with their Asian market strategies, but no one corrected Lucian. Correcting Lucian always caused too much family drama. I said calmly, actually, I have a few questions about the money plan. Lucian leaned forward with that bossy, condescending smile he always used. Sarai, this is complicated corporate finance. We are talking about buying property in another country, construction contracts, and following laws in multiple countries. It's not like balancing a personal bank account. Uncle Bastian tried to help. Lucian, Sarai has a lot of consulting experience. Lucian interrupted him, shaking his head. Yes, that's great and respectable. But this is real business. We are putting tens of millions of dollars into play. It needs someone with real hands-on experience in operations. Dad nodded in agreement. Lucian is right. Sarai, you've done very well with your projects, but this is a different level of responsibility. When you've spent 15 years in the trenches like Lucian, then you can weigh in on these decisions. I had spent 12 years building my own investment portfolio that stretched across 4 continents. I knew a lot about money, investments, and business strategies. But my father and brother didn't see it that way. I just wanted to understand the backup plan. I said softly, what happens if there is a delay in buying the property or getting regulatory approval in Singapore? Lucian laughed. See what I mean? You always look for problems instead of opportunities. That's why you don't understand real business, Sarai. Winners think about success, not what might go wrong. You're still thinking like a mid-level consultant, worrying about tiny things instead of focusing on big execution. Isolde, the CFO, looked uncomfortable. Actually, having a backup plan is normal practice. Dad spoke gently. I appreciate your thoroughness, Isolde, but Lucian has this handled. He's been preparing this expansion for 2 years. Every angle is covered. Lucian stood up and walked around the table with his hands in his pockets, striking a confident power pose. I love you. You're my sister. But Dad put me in charge of operations, not you. You do your own thing. Some people are built for the big leagues. Some people are better suited for support roles. There's no shame in that. The patronizing tone was nothing new. But today it felt sharper, almost cutting. Maybe Lucian was stressed because of the expansion. Or maybe it was just Lucian being Lucian. He continued, stick to your little side jobs. Leave the real business to the professionals who have actually built something. Now if we can return to the expansion timeline. I nodded slowly and closed my laptop. Under the table I pulled out my phone and opened a secret messaging app. It connected directly to my investment director, Cale Tobias. No relation, just the same last name. I typed quickly, need a call. Urgent. Regarding Tobias Industries funding plan. Cale responded within seconds. Available now. Conference line. I quietly gathered my laptop and notebook. Excuse me, I need to take a call. Lucian didn't even pause. Sure. This stuff is probably over your head anyway. I walked out of the boardroom. My heels clicked on the marble floor of the executive suite. I went to the empty conference room 3 doors down. It was small, used mainly for client calls and vendor negotiations. But it had a door that locked and soundproofing that would keep this conversation private. Cale answered immediately. Sarai, what's going on? I need a full breakdown of Tobias Industries' funding structure, I said, settling into a chair. Specifically the $85 million Singapore expansion project that is set to start disbursement next week. There was a pause, then the sound of keys typing. Okay, so the $85 million is structured as a private equity investment through 3 shell corporations that ultimately trace back to your holdings. Your brother Lucian believes the funding is coming from a consortium of international investors arranged through our firm, which is technically true. But you are the primary investor behind this consortium structure. What percentage of the total funding do I control? I asked. You are providing $78 million of the $85 million, Cale said. The other $7 million comes from 2 smaller investors to make it look like a consortium. Without your capital, the project is fundamentally non-viable. The construction contracts require proof of 90% funding availability before they will begin work. I took a deep breath and looked out the window at the city skyline. From this height, I could see the harbor, the shipping containers being loaded and unloaded, and all the busy work that had built my family's wealth. Grandfather Tobias had started with a single warehouse. Dad had turned it into a huge import-export empire. And Lucian thought he alone understood how to grow it. I asked quietly, what happens if I withdraw my investment? Cale's pause was longer this time. Sarai, are you sure you want to walk me through this? If you pull your funding, the project collapses immediately. Lucian has already committed to property deposits, pre-construction contracts, and regulatory fees totaling about $8 million. Those commitments were made assuming full funding was available. If you withdraw, the company would face breach of contract penalties, lost deposits, and possible legal action from the Singapore partners who have already begun preparations. I asked, what is the financial exposure? Cale answered carefully, minimum $12 million in immediate losses, potentially up to $20 million if the Singapore partners pursue maximum damages. Plus, the company's reputation in the Asian markets could be affected, which may hurt future expansion opportunities. I walked back and forth across the conference room. Through the walls, I could faintly hear Lucian's voice still droning on about market penetration strategies, competitor advantages, and the company's cash reserves. I asked Cale after recent dividend distributions and operational expenses. What is Tobias Industries' liquid reserve? Cale said, they have about $15 million in cash. They could absorb the loss, but it would severely limit their ability to pursue other opportunities for the next 18 to 24 months. Your father would have to explain to the board why a supposedly guaranteed funding arrangement fell through. I stopped at the window and watched a cargo ship slowly make its way toward the port. My phone buzzed with a text from Isolde, the CFO. You okay? That was rough in there, it said. Isolde was one of the few people at Tobias Industries who really understood what I did outside the family business. She had helped me structure some of my early investments before my portfolio had grown large enough to require a dedicated management firm. I typed back, I'm fine. I just needed some air. Her response came immediately, your brother is an idiot. Everyone in that room knows it except your father. I smiled despite everything. Isolde had been with the company for 20 years. She had watched Lucian grow from an arrogant MBA graduate to an arrogant VP of operations. She had also watched me build an investment empire that dwarfed anything Lucian had accomplished, even if most of the family remained oblivious to it. I turned my attention back to Kale. I want to understand all the mechanisms. If I withdraw my investment, how quickly does everything unravel? Kale said, the first disbursement is scheduled for next Monday, 5 days from now. That is $30 million for the Singapore Property Trust for the initial land acquisition and permits. If that money does not arrive, the Property Trust has a 48-hour grace period before they invoke penalty clauses. So we're looking at first-level consequences by Wednesday of next week. He continued, Lucian, position and reputation take the primary hit. He's personally guaranteed the project timeline to multiple stakeholders: the board, the Singapore partners, and the construction firms. If it falls apart, he owns the failure. Your father might try to shield him, but the board will ask hard questions about due diligence and risk management. I walked back to the table and sat down. I opened my laptop. On the screen was my personal investment dashboard, showing a real-time overview of holdings that span venture capital, private equity, commercial real estate, and strategic corporate investments. At the top of the screen was my total portfolio value, $847 million. My little side jobs had been quite productive. Kale's voice pulled me back. Sarai, what do you want to do? Through the wall, I could hear laughter from the boardroom. Lucian had probably cracked one of his jokes. The kind Dad loved and everyone else tolerated because Lucian was the heir. I thought about all the family dinners where my business achievements were dismissed as cute or impressive for a woman. I thought about all the board meetings where my questions were treated as naive instead of strategic. I thought about the times Lucian introduced me to his business associates as my sister who does some consulting, while he presented himself as the dynasty's future. I thought about grandfather Tobias, who had taught me to read financial statements when I was 12 years old. He had opened my first investment account as a graduation present from high school. 2 weeks before he died, he had told me, the ones who underestimate you will make the best teachers. Sarai, let them show you what not to become. I whispered quietly into the phone to Kale, pull it. Pull all $78 million from the Tobias Industries Singapore expansion. Structure the withdrawal to hit their accounts Monday morning, right when they are expecting the disbursement to arrive. Make it clean, legal, and completely unambiguous. I want every document showing that the funding was contingent on investor approval, and the investor, me, no longer approves of the project direction. Kale was silent for a long moment. Sarai, this is going to create significant problems for your family, he said. I nodded quietly. This was the only way to show that I was just as powerful as Lucian and maybe, finally, get the family to take me seriously. My family got themselves into a big mess because they believed that who was good at something depended on whether you were a boy or a girl or which child you were, instead of looking at how well you actually did your work. This belief had caused so many problems over the years, and now it had finally come to a head. Do the withdrawal, Kale. Monday morning, I said firmly over the phone. I'll need a note in writing to do it, Kale replied carefully. You'll have it in less than an hour. And Kale, make sure all the papers clearly show exactly who was giving the money. I want Lucian to know who really paid for his project all this time, I added. My voice was calm, but inside my heart was racing. After ending the call, I sat quietly in the big shiny conference room. The room was empty except for me, the large table, and my laptop. My heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit. This was huge. This was like dropping a bomb that could shake the entire family. This was telling my family that I didn't agree with how they ran things. This was about being fair and responsible even if it upset everyone. And honestly, this was something I should have done a long time ago. My phone buzzed again. It was Isolde. Are you coming back? Lucian had just said in the board meeting that we should start building the Singapore project earlier than planned. Dad was eating up the idea, clearly impressed. I straightened my blazer, smoothed my hair, and walked back to the boardroom. When I opened the door, Lucian was standing mid-sentence, explaining how starting early would give them a big advantage in Singapore. Sorry about that, I said as I slid back into my seat. Emergency call. Lucian barely glanced at me. Is everything okay with your little projects? I asked casually. Everything's fine, I said, opening my laptop to take notes, making sure I didn't miss a single word of what Lucian was saying. Please continue. This is very educational, Dad said with a smile, clearly pleased that I was finally showing respect to Lucian, genius. Uncle Bastian looked concerned but didn't say anything. Lucian clicked to his last slide, showing a big graph with the company's projected money growth for the next 5 years. He explained that the Singapore expansion would make the company grow faster than ever before. This is the difference between the big thinkers and the helpers. This is real business, he said with pride. I typed every single word on my laptop, writing down the presentation perfectly. I knew that in 5 days, this would all make fascinating reading. The meeting ended with Dad standing up to shake Lucian's hand. He pulled him into one of those proud half-hugs fathers give sons. You're going to take this company higher than I imagined, Dad said. Lucian beamed and accepted congratulations from everyone around the table. Even Isolde offered a polite professional well done, but I noticed her glance at me. Her eyes seemed to ask a question I couldn't answer yet. As people filed out, Uncle Bastian approached me. Sarai, are you sure you're okay? You seemed distant during the presentation, he asked gently. I'm fine, Uncle Bastian. I'm just thinking about contingency planning, I said, keeping my voice calm. He frowned. Your brother was out of line with his comments. But for what it's worth, I know you've built something amazing outside this company. Your grandfather would be proud of you. My throat tightened and I swallowed hard. Thanks, Uncle Bastian. That means a lot. He gave my shoulder a small squeeze and left. I was alone in the boardroom with my laptop and my thoughts. The sun was setting outside, painting the water of the harbor in shades of orange, gold, and pink. Somewhere in Singapore, people were probably preparing to break ground on a building that would never exist. I spent the next hour in my office, a small room on the executive floor that Dad had given me more as a kind gesture than a necessity. I carefully drafted the formal papers to withdraw the investment. Every word was precise, legal, and airtight. By the time I finished, it was after 7 in the evening. The building was mostly empty except for security guards and a few workaholics staying late. I sent the document to Cale with a simple message. Execute Monday morning, 9 a.m. Singapore time. That's 9 p.m. Eastern Sunday. I want Lucian to get the call while he's having Sunday dinner with Dad. Cale replied almost immediately. Authorization received and confirmed. Sarai, there's no going back from this. I know, I typed back. That's the point. The weekend passed in a surreal kind of normal. Saturday lunch with Mom, where she spent an entire hour talking about Lucian's brilliant expansion plan. I smiled and nodded politely while she gushed, knowing that she didn't realize the real story. Sunday brunch at Dad's club was similar. 3 of his golf friends congratulated me on having such an impressive brother. I smiled, nodded, and said all the appropriate things, all the while keeping my phone in my purse. It was quietly waiting for the moment I had planned for Sunday evening. At 8:45 p.m. I was at home, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine and my laptop open. At 8:50, Cale sent a text. Withdrawal documents filing now. Singapore Property Trust will receive notification at 9 a.m. their time, which is approximately 10 minutes from now. At 9:03 p.m. my phone rang. Lucian. I let it go to voicemail. At 9:07 Dad called. I also let that go to voicemail. At 9:12 Isolde texted me, "What did you do? Your brother is losing his mind. Your father just called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." I replied simply, I withdrew my investment from a project I didn't believe was properly managed. It's called fiduciary responsibility. At 9:15 Lucian called again. This time I answered. "What the hell did you do?" His voice was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "Hi Lucian. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How's your evening?" I said politely, trying to stay calm. "Don't play games with me, Sarai. I just spoke with the Singapore Property Trust. They're saying our primary funding source has withdrawn $78 million. They're threatening breach of contract penalties." "What did you do?" "I withdrew my investment from a project that was being mismanaged by someone who didn't understand real business," I said calmly. "There's no way. The funding came from Cale Chen's investment firm. There was a whole group. Cale Chen is my investment director. The consortium gave the money from my portfolio, which is currently worth $847 million. But I guess that's just cute for a woman doing consulting, right? Sarai, listen to me." "No, Lucian. You listen. For 12 years I've been building a real business empire while you played corporate prince in Dad's company. I've invested in startups that went public. I've funded real estate developments across 4 continents. I've advised companies that make Tobias Industries look like a lemonade stand. And all the while, you treated me like I was only balancing a checkbook. Sorry, please, Lucian said. I'm not done, I said firmly. The funding I pulled was going to be my last investment in you. I was going to let you have your moment, let you build your Singapore expansion on my money and never tell anyone. I wanted to stay the supportive little sister while you collected all the glory. But then, in that boardroom, you told me to stick to my little side jobs. So I did. My side job right now is what Toby asked your dream project collapse. I could hear other voices in the background now. Dad was probably demanding to know what was happening. You can't do this, Sarai, Lucian said. His voice sounded closer to panic now. The penalties alone will cost the company at least $12 million. The reputation damage could be worse. This isn't just about me. This affects everyone. Mom, Dad, Uncle Bastian, all the employees. Then you should have thought of that before you dismissed the person who was funding your vision, I said. This is what happens when you underestimate people. This is what real business consequences look like. Welcome to the big leagues. I ended the call. The phone rang again immediately. This time it was Dad. I answered. Sarai, you will explain yourself right now. What have you done? Do you have any idea of the damage you've caused? The Singapore partners are threatening legal action. We have $8 million in committed expenses that we can't back out of. How could you sabotage your own family like this? I didn't sabotage anyone, Dad. I withdrew my private investment from a project I no longer supported. That's my right as an investor, I said firmly. Your investment? What are you talking about? The funding was arranged through my investment firm using my money from my portfolio. The same portfolio that's been generating 8-figure annual returns for the past 6 years, I said. The same little side jobs that everyone at Tobias Industries likes to pat me on the head about. Dad, you treated it like it was nothing. Dad was quiet. I could almost hear him thinking, recalculating, trying to fit this information into his worldview. You're saying you provided the $78 million for the Singapore expansion? He finally asked. Yes. And I withdrew it because your son lacks the judgment and leadership skills needed to execute the project successfully. He treats risk assessment as pessimism and contingency planning as weakness. He values confidence over competence. That's your son you're talking about. That's exactly who I'm talking about. Lucian is great at presentations and terrible at execution. He thinks real business is about bold declarations and handshakes when it's actually about due diligence, risk management, and strategic patience. I've been what Toby asked him operate for 15 years. Dad, I know exactly what he's capable of, and I'm not willing to risk $78 million on his ego. Sarah, you need to fix this. Call your people. Tell them it was a mistake. Get that funding restored. No, Dad, I said firmly. The funding withdrawal stands. Lucian can find other investors if he believes in the project so strongly. He can approach venture capital firms, private equity, or traditional banks. He can do what every other business person does when they need capital. Make a compelling case based on solid fundamentals and proven track records. But he cannot use my money while treating me like I'm too stupid to understand what real business looks like. Sorry, this is family, Dad said. Exactly. It's family debt. Which is why it hurts so much that you've spent decades dismissing everything I've accomplished. Do you know how many times I've sat in that boardroom listening to Lucian mock my little consulting projects while you nodded along? Do you have any idea what it's like to have built something extraordinary and have your own father treat it as cute? I never have. Yes, you did. You do. Today, in that meeting when I asked about contingency planning, you told me to let the professionals handle it. I have more capital under management than Tobias Industries' entire market valuation, and you treated me like I was a child asking about grown-up topics. Dad's voice was harder now. So this is revenge. You're willing to damage the family company because of hurt feelings. This isn't revenge, Dad. This has consequences. Lucian spent 2 years planning an expansion on funding he didn't understand. He committed the company to contracts without verifying his capital sources. He treated his primary investor with contempt. Those are fundamental business failures and they have costs. He's learning about those costs right now. Sarai, the emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. I'll be there. I'll have full documentation showing the funding structure, the withdrawal authorization, and the timeline of events. The board can evaluate whether Lucian exercised appropriate due diligence in understanding his capital sources. They can decide whether someone who didn't know who was funding his flagship project should be making strategic decisions for the company. You're trying to destroy your brother, Dad said. No, I'm showing him the real world, I said. He's learning what happens when you ignore experience, disrespect people who support you, and gamble with money that isn't understood. This is not about revenge. It's about responsibility, Dad. Something Lucian never seemed to value. Oh, Dad. I'm trying to teach him a lesson you should have taught him a long time ago. Respect is earned by being good at what you do, not just because of your age, your position, or your family. I ended the call and turned off my phone. I wanted to make sure no interruptions would distract me today. The next morning, I arrived at Tobias Industries at 7:30 a.m., a full hour and a half before the emergency board meeting was supposed to start. I didn't want to be late. Isolde was already there. She was holding a cup of coffee and looked very tired, as if she had stayed up all night worrying about what would happen today. You actually did it, she said quietly, staring at me. You really pulled the funding. Yes, I did, I said. But this is just the beginning. Your father is talking about taking you off the board, and your brother is even thinking about suing. This is serious. Isolde looked shocked. This is bad. I handed her a small USB drive. It's about to get worse, I said. This has all the documents about the investment structure, including the shell companies, the way the consortium was arranged, and proof of where the money really came from. Lucian should have checked all of this, but he didn't. Make sure every board member gets a copy before the meeting starts. Isolde took the USB slowly, like it was a live grenade. Is this really happening? She asked. No, Isolde, I said. It already happened. We're just showing it clearly on paper now. By 8:45 a.m., the boardroom was filling up. Uncle Bastian walked in looking very serious, like he was carrying the weight of the whole company on his shoulders. Leander, Dad's lawyer friend, came in next. He was reading documents on his tablet, looking very focused. Dad and Lucian arrived together. Both of them looked like they had hardly slept. Lucian's eyes were red and his tie was slightly crooked. I had never seen him look anything less than perfectly polished before. Today he looked exhausted and nervous. At exactly 9 a.m., Dad called the meeting to order. We are here because of a crisis, Dad said in a serious voice. This crisis could put Tobias Industries at great financial risk and legal trouble. The Singapore expansion project, which this board approved 3 months ago, has lost its main funding. Sarai has withdrawn $78 million in investment money, effective immediately. This withdrawal triggers breach of contract penalties, legal liability, and damage to our reputation that could cost the company more than $20 million. Uncle Bastian raised his hand. Before we go further, I think we need to understand the funding better. Sarai, can you explain how you were providing $78 million for this project without the board knowing? I opened my laptop and connected it to the boardroom's display screen. The money was structured as a private investment through Kale Tobias Investment Management. Lucian approached my firm asking for money for the expansion. My firm created a consortium using 3 holding companies that I control. Lucian was told that the funding came from a group of international investors. That is technically true. I am one of those international investors. But here's why I kept it private. I wanted to see if the project was viable on its own, without family politics or favoritism affecting the evaluation. My team conducted all the research, market analysis, risk assessment, and legal reviews. The project had potential, so I approved the funding. Lucian spoke for the first time. His voice was tight and nervous. Then why withdraw now? I looked at him directly. Because the person running the project, meaning you, Lucian, was not competent enough. You treat warnings as if they are negativity. You ignore important concerns and call them ignorant. I do not trust you with $78 million of my money. Lucian's face turned red. That's personal, not professional. No, I said calmly. It's professional. You spent 2 years planning an $85 million expansion without verifying the money sources. You signed contracts without confirming the funds were secured. You ignored basic due diligence rules because you trusted your own vision too much. You didn't ask simple, important questions, and Lucian, you asked none of them. Dad interrupted, looking upset. Sarai, that's unfair. Lucian was told the funding was confirmed. Confirmed by whom? I asked. Dad. Lucian received documents saying a consortium would provide the money. Did he check who really controlled the consortium? Did he ask what conditions existed for continued investment? Did he look at the company registrations? No, he didn't. These are basic questions any competent executive would ask. Lucian asked none of them. Isolde spoke up quietly. She's right. I checked the documents this morning. The agreements clearly stated that capital disbursement was dependent on ongoing investor approval. Lucian signed the agreements without questioning this contingency clause. Lucian's face flushed red. He looked shocked. I didn't think my own sister would sabotage me. This isn't sabotage, Lucian, I said firmly. This is how the market works. Investors pull money from projects that they do not believe will succeed. You learned that lesson the expensive way. The meeting continued for another 90 minutes. Uncle Bastian asked detailed questions about the investment structure. Leander focused on potential legal liabilities. Isolde presented worst-case financial scenarios. Dad sat at the head of the table, silent, his expression unreadable. Finally, Uncle Bastian leaned back in his chair. I need to ask the obvious question, he said. Sarai, what is the total value of your investment portfolio as of this morning? $847 million, I said. The room went completely silent. Say that again, Leander said slowly, clearly trying to process the number. My current investment portfolio is worth $847 million. Annual returns average between $65 and $90 million depending on market conditions. I manage direct investments in 23 companies, hold significant real estate in 6 countries, and advise 3 Fortune 500 corporations on their Asian market strategies. My small side projects have turned out to be quite profitable. Dad stared at me looking like I was a stranger. That's not possible, he said. It's all documented in the materials Isolde gave you, I replied. Full financial statements, audited by Deloitte, verified by 3 separate banks. I built it over 12 years, starting with the $500,000 inheritance Grandpa Tobias left me, reinvesting every dollar of profit instead of spending it on luxury items or status symbols. Lucian looked physically ill. You have almost $1 billion? He asked. I have a portfolio that will likely cross the $1 billion threshold within the next 18 months, I said. Which is why I am careful about where I invest my capital and why I am no longer willing to invest in projects run by people who think confidence is a substitute for competence. Uncle Bastian actually laughed, a sharp, surprised sound. Cale, he asked, did you know about this? Dad shook his head slowly. I thought she was doing consulting work. I had no idea. Because you never asked, I said quietly. For 12 years, you never once asked me for a detailed breakdown of my business activities. You assumed consulting meant small projects and modest fees. You assumed wrong. The meeting ended with no clear resolution. Lucian's expansion project was dead. Everyone acknowledged that. The question now was what to do next. How to handle the penalties. How to explain the failure to stakeholders. As people filed out, Dad approached me. Sarai, I think we need to talk privately. We went to his office, a space that had always intimidated me as a child. Now it looked like any other corporate executive's office. Expensive furniture, an impressive view, framed awards on the walls. I underestimated you, Dad said finally. I have been underestimating you for a very long time. Yes, but that doesn't excuse what you did. Pulling the funding caused real damage. But the damage was caused by Lucian not understanding his own capital structure. I simply withdrew my money. Everything that followed was a consequence of his poor planning. Dad sat heavily in his chair. $847 million. How is that even possible? Grandpa taught me to read financial statements when I was 12, I said. He taught me to think in terms of value creation, not consumption. When he died and left me money, I invested it instead of spending it. I studied markets, built relationships, and took calculated risks. I did everything you always said you valued. Discipline, vision, patience. I did it outside Tobias Industries where you couldn't see it. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have patted me on the head and said it was cute that I was playing with stocks? Dad didn't answer, which said enough. What happens now? He asked. That's up to you, Dad, I said. I'm still a board member. I still own my shares in Tobias Industries, but I'm not going to keep funding Lucian ego with my capital. If he wants to rebuild his expansion plans, he can find investors who actually respect him enough to verify their funding sources. I stood to leave, then paused at the door. And Dad, the next time someone in that boardroom asks a question about risk management or backup plans, maybe listen to the answer instead of dismissing it as ignorance. You might be surprised by what people know when you actually hear them. 3 weeks later, Lucian resigned from Tobias Industries. The official statement said he was pursuing other opportunities. The truth was he couldn't face the board after they learned the full scope of his mistakes. Dad called a few times trying to rebuild bridges, but the conversations were awkward and brief. Uncle Bastian asked me to lunch. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have spoken up more in those meetings. I knew you were brilliant and I let your father and brother diminish you. You tried, Uncle Bastian. I heard you. What will you do now?" I smiled. "Keep building. Keep investing. Maybe start looking at companies where competence is actually valued over birth order." Tobias Industries could use someone like that, I said carefully. Someone who actually knows what they're doing. "Are you offering me Lucian position?" "I'm saying the board is reconsidering our leadership structure, and maybe it's time for the most qualified person to run the company, regardless of the old succession plan." I thought about Grandpa Tobias, about building something meaningful, and about the difference between legacy and ego. "Let me think about it," I said. My phone buzzed. A message from Kale. "New investment opportunity just came through. Tech startup Series B $15 million round. Interested?" I typed back, "Send me the details, but make sure they understand their capital sources up front this time. I'm done with surprises." Real business, I had learned, wasn't about bold declarations or confident handshakes. It was about understanding who held the power, who provided the capital, and what happened when assumptions met reality. My brother had learned that lesson the expensive way. I had learned it much earlier thanks to Grandpa Tobias, who believed in me when others didn't, and who taught me that being underestimated was just another form of competitive advantage. The ones who dismiss you make the best teachers. Grandpa Tobias had been right about that.